welcome in to the Just Basketball Show for Thursday, July 27th. I'm Chris Manning. That's Brendon Kleen. If you haven't already, follow us and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. 5 stars only. Like you did to your friend's chest in middle school, but for podcast reviews. Hit subscribe on the Just Basketball Fans YouTube channel as well. Also want to say about our friends at Homage. Homage is an ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company that uses vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and pop culture. They offer a range of official licenses, NFL, NBA, MLB, Nickelodeon, and more, and hundreds of other unique lifestyle pop culture designs. Just not another fan teacher company. They're crafting the most soft, most nostalgic, most comfortable, most awesome clothing for sports fans, pop culture aficionados, and everyone in between. Click the link below in our in the description of this podcast episode, or in the link in our podcast, and buy something, and some of that money comes back to support the Just Basketball Show. Do that. It'd be great. Please support the show by doing that way. Our big show today, jam-packed show. We have Candace Parker having foot surgery. We do not know how long she's going to be out, which not great, but if any team could absorb that, is it the Aces? We'll talk about it. We're going to talk about the slop of the week. Brennan's going to talk us through that one. He has a particularly sloppy version of that. It's a lot of work, but I feel like I wish we could have like the sloppy steaks like clip from I Think You Should Leave, bringing that in.
Or at the very least, just a Photoshop of the head of the person we discussed that week, or even just like a screenshot of the paragraph of nonsense that we happen to be discussing. This week it is just head coaches talking in July. I don't even understand. There's another one with Joe Mazzulla that we easily could have used about Derek White being the starting point guard. I'm like, who is making Joe Mazzulla give interviews? Let the man have a vacation. What is he doing speaking on July 26th about the starting point guard?
Baston. We're also going to talk about, speaking of Baston, we're going to talk about the Jaylen Brown extension. And then we're going to have our big thrust of today is the should be traded but won't be all-stars. We have some names. I think some of them we're going to hit on. Some of them we're not going to dive into as much. Looking at our list, Brendon, we only have one overlap, which I think is kind of interesting.
Why are we not going to dive into some of them? That's you don't like my list? Is that
No, there's one on my list I don't really want to make you talk about.
Okay. All right. I was just making sure it wasn't you just reviewed my list and you were like no, and yes or something.
No, there's one on my list that I don't really have a lot to say about it. Just there's a situation in the league that I look at more and more, and I'm like, and then there's another guy on this list that you've talked about a lot and we've talked about, and I just don't know where he could get traded reasonably, but we'll get there. All right, so let's start today with a fun bit of stuff, and that's that the NBA is going to have a game in Mexico City this year. Mexico City, which has a G League team, which by all accounts has done really well down there, and the players that have gone down there seem to like it. Mark Spears did a story about this at Antscape last year. In November, the Hawks and the Magic are going to play a game in Mexico City. This is going to be at altitude. I'm curious to see what that looks like. It's like a whole other level of altitude. But this is further proof, not that we really needed it, that the NBA is expanding. This is a global league now. They're going to play the Cavs and the Nets are going to play in Paris this year in January. The Bulls and the Pistons played there last season in Paris, which weird choice if you wanted to boom the French market to put those two teams there last season, but okay.
Are you going to Paris for Cleveland?
Dude, I do not make enough money. I do not have enough money to go to Paris. Would I love to? Yeah, that would be incredible. Do I have the funds for that? No. If someone wants to cover,
you can get a deal on plane tickets for a quick trip. It's not that expensive.
A quick trip. Okay. That's. I mean,
you don't care about the Cleveland Cavaliers. Just say that. I mean, that's. You're not a fan. You don't want to cover the game, and your audience should just be aware of that. It's fine.
That's not accurate. It's just then you got to get a hotel and it's just a lot. It's just a lot. If I had someone footing the bill, we're there. Yeah. But this made me think. Let's talk about cities we would like to see NBA games. And I think we're going to see more places get NBA games in the future, like a one-off regular season game, that kind of stuff.
Can we talk about Mexico first real quick, though? Because,
yeah,
You're right. There are the Capitanes are there, and that's a team that they bought and just installed in the G League. I didn't realize the elevation was so dramatic. I went to Mexico City last September. Didn't feel it, honestly. And I haven't spent a ton of time. I mean, I didn't play sports, but usually.
No, you're out here being like, my lung capacity is incredible. What is elevation? So you're all just losers with bad cardio.
Yeah. I think maybe what it is the whole entire area is just, you don't see mountains, so it's like maybe it is a little bit of a psychological thing, but that absolutely will be a factor for anybody trying to play sports there. So that was my main point, but I just think it's really cool that the league is going down there, and the sport does seem like it's growing with that, and the fact that there was even a successful enough or established enough basketball program to be purchased and put in that way is a testament, and that country's national team qualified for the FIBA World Cup this year, and it's coached by Caleb Canales, who was the first Mexican-American head coach in league history, back with the Portland Trail Blazers once upon a time, and then he bounced around as an assistant coach. I edited a feature on him from Katie Heindel. Shout out to Katie. She's a great writer, and she interviewed Caleb about his efforts to get the team qualified for the World Cup for the first time, maybe ever, if not in a very long time, and they'll be in South Asia for the World Cup this year. So that one, you said Paris doesn't make a whole ton of sense, maybe based on the teams that were there and whatnot. I'm not sure if, the Mexico City thing is like Hawks magic, maybe not the best of the best, but, anybody who can go down there and just grow the game and get people out there and everything, I think it does make a lot of sense. I would not be surprised if we see more of that. The Suns and Spurs played preseason games down there a couple of years in a row, so it's been a priority for the league for a long time.
And again, this is an expansion possibility. I don't know if this is going to be team 31 or 32, but I don't think it's out of the question.
If I were an NBA team and I was thinking creatively as an ownership about, opportunities to make money, expand, get my name out there, grow the brand, I would absolutely be trying to buy that team from the league. I think it's league run right now. I'm not sure if the league is super interested in selling, because I think it's a nice thing for them to be able to take ownership of, but I would be trying that for sure. It does seem like it would be a pretty smart thing to do. The problem is it's really far for the Northeast. So unless there's a big schedule change, it is a little hard. In Phoenix, it was a 4.5-hour flight southeast for me. And I'm about as far south, outside of San Antonio as you could possibly get. So that's tough. But yeah, I mean, what other cities did you have in mind outside of these two that they've done? And they've done, Abu Dhabi in the preseason, right? That's happening?
Yeah, they did that last year. I think you'll see those for preseason games. The travel for those is just more extreme. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a couple ways to look at this. I think Japan, somewhere in Japan, Tokyo, Kyoto, somewhere in that region would be really cool from a cultural standpoint. I think Australia from a cultural standpoint would be cool for preseason. Those are travel lengths that I think make regular season much more difficult. Not that
they do have the Australian teams that have been coming to the U.S. for preseason too. So yes, that's another little aspect of this. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think you go to big European cities. I think Paris is an obvious one. I think Barcelona or Madrid would be layups, right? You pick a team that has one of the really great Spanish players on it. Get Ricky Rubio there before his career ends in Barcelona, and you're gonna do numbers. You got to book for the market a little bit. I'm a little bit surprised Victor Wembanyama is not in this game as a rookie, because I think it just would have been insane. But he should be a lock for that every year. Beyond this, honestly, whatever team he's on should just be playing in Paris. If I'm being honest. I'd be Barcelona, Madrid. I think somewhere in England would be cool, just because it's London. You could do London and say hey, we had a game in London. That's a really cool thing to do. I think if I was going to dream a big one that I don't think is that realistic, I'm going somewhere in Eastern Europe where Luka, in Serbia, in Lithuania, somewhere in that region. Because of all the exports you have from there, put a game in Belgrade, put a game in Budapest. Let's get a game in that region where all these greats have come from in the last 20, 30 years. And we have some great guys from there now.
Having the Spurs play in France feels like a layup.
Book
with
for the
Victor
market.
Nalbandian.
Book for the market. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All good suggestions. I'll throw out and I don't know anywhere near enough about the culture of Africa to know what the best cities would be, but somewhere like Dakar, Senegal, which there are a lot of Senegalese basketball players that have come through. That is a country that's kind of on the map there, and it's the closest to our coast that you can basically get. Something in Africa with how much the league has put in to the Basketball Africa League and the NBA Africa camps and Masai Ujiri's work over there and everything like that. That seems inevitable that we will start to see actual NBA stuff happening over there more often.
Here's what I would wonder this is purely speculative and kind of based on what it seems like the UFC might do in going to Africa. I wonder if they might go to South Africa first, which is very loaded. There's a lot going on with that. Historically and whatnot.
Yeah, it could easily be that.
But
what did you think?
It's also
this
Johannesburg.
Exactly, and it's a little bit more comfortable, let's say, right?
And they might have the honestly, they're gonna have. They want to go somewhere where they have 25,000, 30,000 modern arenas. It's kind of a must.
What did you think of Jokic not playing in the World Cup? By the way, this is off the beaten path, but you mentioned Eastern Europe. He's not going to be playing for Serbia in the World Cup because he said he's just exhausted and physically beaten up and doesn't want to deal with it.
Fine, I have no qualm with that, honestly. It sucks. I get it. If this was soccer, this would be an international scandal. But international basketball doesn't matter as much as international.
Does it surprise you that it doesn't for him though? Because he is from a country where it's not exactly like they've just been, filling, storage rooms with trophies over the years.
Yes, but it's also if there's ever a time where I would understand him feeling just run into the ground, it's right now. So I get it.
It's just what was interesting to me about it is it signals that as much as we all joke about him not caring about some of the things that modern superstars care about in the NBA, or that he just wants to get home, and all the memes and jokes that were obviously exaggerated, and he's, I think, more intentionally funny than he gets credit for, but that he does care about winning an NBA championship quite a bit because he got that, and that felt like the thing that he could breathe a sigh of relief after. Not, okay, I did that little thing, now go let me do what I want to really achieve, and he's never gotten a World Cup anything, so I guess I did anticipate this would matter at least equally to him as an NBA trophy, but it seems like it doesn't because he's already 30 years old. He might not really do it again in 4 years, and there's the Olympics next year. Maybe he will then, but it's interesting. He might have missed his best chance,
Yeah, especially considering the American team you would expect the Olympic team might be a little bit deeper or better than the team we have at the World Cup. So we'll see. All right, let's move on to Candace Parker. Did I skip your cities? Do you have a city?
I said the Africa ones.
Okay. Do you have nowhere else? Just that. The other one I would say, Brendan, is Brazil or Argentina. Go South America because that would be doable flight wise. And you have imagine playing a game in Buenos Aires and have Manu as the MC of the event. It'd be cool.
Those are really long flights, and I do think that the sport's not as big there. So I would think Europe and Africa probably bigger priorities, and Asia, which they already do that too.
Yeah, the Japan preseason one to me seems like. But again, I do think you'll see Middle East stuff. You're telling me the Wizards aren't going to play in Qatar?
Yeah.
They're going to play in Qatar. All right, Candace Parker, the future Hall of Famer, the Aces forward, is out indefinitely after undergoing successful foot surgery on a fractured foot. She had apparently been playing with this the entire season. And needed the surgery to protect her long-term health. In a statement on her Instagram, she wrote that she's been playing with the fracture all season, tolerating the pain, but after consulting with doctors, the only option to be healthy again and avoid further injury was elect for surgery. I'll rehab and work my way towards being as healthy as soon as possible for my teammates, for my circle, for my family, for myself. Brennan, she's averaging 9 points, 5.4 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 1.5 steals. I think she's certainly elevated and been a big part of the Aces, but she's got 2 months to be back. I don't really think of this as a massive issue for the Aces. It's it's a blow because it's Candace Parker, but they're kind of built to absorb this.
So you're anticipating she'll be back? I kind of felt reading the tea leaves of how things were worded that even the Aces statement, which basically said the same thing, but just the fact that nobody is jumping to a timetable or anything like that and sort of emphasizing the pain level and the future-mindedness of getting this surgery, all that stuff, I don't know. It did have me worried this might be a season-ending type of thing for her.
I wouldn't guarantee she is 37. Like, this is an older player who has miles on her, all that stuff. This certainly this maybe opens the door a little bit for the Liberty, more than anything else. I just think, like, if any team is going to absorb it, it's a team that has A'ja Wilson, Chelsea Gray, Jackie Young, and Kelsey Plum, and Kia Stokes playing pretty well in the minutes with those other four.
Yeah, so the starting lineup with Stokes, those 4 stars in Stokes, is plus 28 net rating this year. Very good.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I think you're overestimating just how much they're going to waltz through with no big deal. They're not a deep team, and especially at that spot. So it's like, even if Stokes is good enough, which she's always been kind of a controversial player, just not like anything off the court, but just in terms of how valuable she really is, I think she's done a good job as just sort of a screen and roll player and rebounder there, but there's nothing behind her effectively, and she's an exploitable. I mean, if you're talking about the Liberty, she will have to guard Jonquel Jones, who just won Player of the Week and is finally breaking out.
We should.
She's just a bench player to me. So
we should. I'll be at Aces Liberty next a week from Sunday. Very excited about that. When we talk about that, can we talk about the Commissioner's Cup? I think we need to carve out time to talk about Jonquel Jones this season. You've had some really good points when we've talked about this privately that I think we'll need to bring to the listeners, to our viewers. But continue.
No, that's my point. I think Stokes is, even if she's passable enough and they keep winning with her, I think that she is not a surefire thing. They traded Erica Hamby in order to fit Candace Parker on their roster. So they swapped out 1 for 1. There's nobody that's just going to slide in there. And you look at like some of their other lineup options, if they were to put Alicia Clark in that 5-player unit, then they are only plus 8. And one of their other better bench players, Kirsten Bball, who is like a Swiss Army knife, kind of zero offensively, but maybe developing on that end and really just a defender and kind of energy player. That group has not played any minutes with her as the 5th player. Raquana Williams just went through some criminal stuff today that came to light, so she is not expected to play the rest of the season for this team. So this was already a team that played 7 or 8 players most nights, and they just lost one of them. So I think it's pretty significant.
I think it is significant. I'm not trying to say it's not significant. I just kind of think the team that is already like has the upper level talent, I just kind of think and Becky Hammond coaching, I just kind of think if any team is going to figure this out, it's going to be them. If any team, it's because.
Yeah, I would like a because. You just keep saying it's going to work out. That's not an argument.
That's fair. I think this can be fine for them because of the star talent. I think because you have A'ja Wilson, because you have Kelsey Plum, because you have Chelsea Gray, because you have Jackie Young, because of the stars you have, because of the stars they have, I think there's just enough going on there at the upper level that I think they can get through this. It's not going to make it easier, but I think that upper level talent is so good and the coaching is so good that the Aces are got to still be the favorites to win the title. I think that's just where I'm at with it. I think it's more likely today with this injury that the Liberty or someone else win the title. Like the number on the field has a little more attraction as a bet now, let's say. But the Aces should still be the favorite. That's just where I'm at with it. I think there is more room for someone to slide in. If Stewie goes nuclear in the finals, New York Liberty, you're world champions. But I still think that the Aces have to be the favorite because of the upper echelon talent.
Sure, I worry about the rebounding, and I think the Liberty were already one of the advantages that they had, if you even took it seriously, that they could win this year, was their depth, and so that just got exacerbated. We'll have to see. Again, they've been without Candace for a while already and have not lost a game. That plus 28 net rating for the Stokes and Stars lineup, let's call it, is great evidence that they're going to be able to keep winning. It is more of a playoff concern for me than it is about their place in the standings or anything like that. On the Candace side, I mean, next season would be year 17 for her. She's on a 1-year contract, already took a pay cut to come here. It would be hard if I'm Vegas and I know that this is a potential long-term rehab process or something that could ail her in the future, and we don't know that. But if it is that, it would be a question mark for me if I'm able to use a roster and salary spot on her, knowing how significant these depth concerns are going to be. Their whole core is locked in, so maybe that's overstated, but I would be a little bit questioning it. I think this is her best place to continue to win if she wants to continue her career, but it's going to be interesting to see where this leaves her with how she views her future. It would be also a pretty bad way to go out, though, so it's not an easy answer.
No, and look, she's closer to the end than the beginning now. We knew that coming into this year. Anytime you're at this age playing and you've played as much as she has, I mean, we've seen this with LeBron. We've seen this with how many NBA guys. We've seen this with how many other WNBA stars. Like, you get to your late 30s, you're just not the same, and the injury risk is higher. I mean, you see this in your market. Like, Deandre Ayton isn't, like, not really the same anymore, and that just happens when you get older and you play as much as they have. Like, it does just, over time, this does just catch up to you to some way. It's inevitable that something like this might just happen. But it was clear that she showed a lot to contribute and offer, and when she was healthy this year. So that's kind of the bummer more than anything else. If you were to pick today, would you still pick them to win it?
Yeah, I would. But I think things are trending in an interesting direction, and it makes for a better season, honestly. I mean, that's a kind of a gross thing to say after a player gets injured, but it's going to make the Aces human. And I hope she's able to get back on the court, like you said, but it at least makes them beatable in a way that I don't think they were if they were going to be fully healthy. Even with the Liberty playing a little better lately, I still didn't feel like they were going to be able to go blow for blow, whereas you take one of the better players on this Vegas team away, and of course things get a lot closer. So I'm excited to see the 3 matchups that they play all in a row in a couple weeks here. Should be a great measuring stick.
Slop of the week time, Brendan. Talk us through this. Let's go.
So again, this is NBA coaches speaking in late July for Lord knows what reason. I genuinely don't even know what the instance of why Nick Nurse was talking to media when he gave this quote, but the quote is about Paul Reed. Sorry. It is not coaches speaking. It is Paul Reed speaking about something that Nick Nurse told him. I got my mind all thrown off because of the Joe Mazzulla thing that I was going to use as Slop of the week. He talked about molding me into a Pascal Siakam type player, is the quote from Paul Reed about what Nick Nurse told him. Somebody who can kind of do it all. Shoot the ball, drive, pass, but right now it's all about focusing on my shot mechanics. Is Paul Reed the next Pascal Siakam?
If that's
All
the
NBA
case,
Paul Reed coming up. Bball Paul for second team All NBA this year. What do you think?
should the Atlanta Hawks trade for Bball Paul? We'll talk about that coming up next.
Yeah, why it's okay that Joel Embiid might ask out. Diamond in the rough waiting there right behind him. What did you think of the Reed contract in general? We didn't really talk about it. $8 million. I loved how he said he didn't ever want to go to Utah, and he was really thankful that the Sixers matched.
Yeah. I think it's fine for him. He's 24. There's 2 non-guaranteed years in it. So like you can kind of like, okay. So here, this is actually the most interesting part of the contract, and this is just Danny Ainge just really sticking a needle in it. 2024-2025 is non-guaranteed. It is fully guaranteed if the 76ers win their first round playoff series this year or 110-25. So if the Sixers like make it to the second round, Paul Reed has $7 million guaranteed. I don't think I've ever seen that before in a contract. But that's incredible needling a team that you might want to like vulture for stuff if Joel Embiid doesn't get what he wants. You know what I mean? Like that's just like incredible chicanery in a contract. But it's like fine. Like that's like well below mid-level value for a guy that I think can be like a pretty good backup center. And like that's like a fine value for someone that I think probably you'd expect to get better 24, 25, 26. Like it's
I thought he played
decent
really
for him.
well in the playoffs when Embiid had to go out, and then even when he was just backing Embiid up. I think he acquitted himself pretty well. I think that's probably why they ended up bringing him back. I think if he doesn't have those moments, he's probably a member of the Utah Jazz, I guess. I don't know. But the idea that he's going to develop the perimeter skill to be Pascal Siakam is just kind of hilarious. It feels like Nick Nurse just playing like pass player Mad Libs.
It's like, sure, buddy, you're Pascal Siakam, just tapping him on the shoulder. The funniest also part about this is that he said that he didn't think they were going to match it because it's like, I saw Trez and Bamba, and his agent was like, they're not likely to match it. And then I was real surprised, he said, when the Sixers match it. So, like, look, I don't know what that is supposed to mean. And also, what version of Pascal Siakam is he referring to? I guess is my other question here. Is this like LeBron, like 2018 LeBronto era Siakam, where he was like defending and playing the four and like doing all kinds of helpful stuff on defense and filling in on offense, and there was tapping into that potential as much as you could? Or is it like last year, the year before that, like all NBA-ish level Pascal Siakam, who's making like a ton of money and is going to want a max now? Like which version?
The quote is all about offense. It says shoot, drive, and pass. So it sounds like, but that also
maybe
not
that also
the offensive hub version of Siakam, but at least
that sounds like 2018 Siakam, who was like shooting and like getting some post ups and stuff. But it's like it sounds crazy. Nick Nurse could absolutely be like talking out of his butt a little bit there.
Well, of course. He's a new guy trying to ingratiate himself with a new team, but
also just like we're playing phone. We're playing like I can't remember the name of the game because my brain is just goop apparently. But it's like we're playing like we're
telephone.
Yeah, we're like this. Yeah, we're playing telephone with quotes from Nick Nurse here, and like I can't wait for someone to ask him about this and how he answers it, because like one of the first questions at media day from like Kyle Neubeck or Keith Pompey or someone else in that media corps should be like, so what? Hey, hey Nick, Kyle Neubeck from the Philly Voice here. What did Paul Reed makes you think he's like Pascal Siakam? Like I just like there's your question, and I just want to see what the answer would be to that.
I agree it should be asked because it would be funny content. With all due respect, I think there's a lot of other stuff going on in Philadelphia that will probably get top billing in the first press conference that they are able to ask about. Last
question.
It would be kind of a big troll if one of those guys was like, okay, so Joel Embiid just asked out, but more pressingly, there was a quote about the Siakam-Reed comparison. Could you elucidate on that, Mr. Nurse? Like, that would be
first
hilarious.
After you spend your whole presser at training camp asking about what James Harden's weighing in at, then you can, after media day, after the first practice, you can be like, hey, Paul Reed, what's going on there? What's the vibes?
So I have more on the Sixers later in the show as a little bit of a tease there, but I looked up the last part of this. It actually does intrigue me, thinking of different ways that Reed can impact the team, and the fact that they are paying decent money for a backup to a super maxed out MVP player is Paul Reed playing the four. They played 10 minutes together all of last year, according to playbyplaystats.com. In the regular season, I doubt they played together in the playoffs. 10 minutes minus 31 net rating. I'm going to look at the playoffs. They played 0 minutes together in the playoffs. I don't particularly see Reed as that type of player, but I guess there's a world in which that money could be a little better spent if he's able to do that. Look, his 3-point numbers are, even if he says that he wants to shoot under Nick Nurse, he has attempted 23s in his NBA career and made 15% of them. So, great story. Love the nickname. Excited for his continued development, but I think Siakam might be setting him up for disappointment. I think Nick Nurse needs to do better. Stop lying to his players.
Boy, that's coaches. Honestly, Brendan, I'm gonna swerve on this for you. I think they should just talk all July. Give me the weirdest stuff possible, so I can just think about weird things that people are saying in July.
Yeah, Joe Mazzulla just he had. I didn't read the specific quote about the Brogdon White thing, but there was something about like taking the necessary steps to integrate him back into the team after they nearly traded him. And I'm like,
yeah.
It's not that serious. Players get almost traded all the time. I think Malcolm Brogdon, who is like this fourth best player, sixth best player on their team, it's like, hey, just come to workouts. There you go. You're reintegrated.
It's not like soccer.
You're
teams
Malcolm
haven't
Brogdon.
Soccer teams have been doing this for years.
Yeah, Hakeem Ziyech with Chelsea was supposed to go to PSG and got paperwork sent in too late and had to continue to play for them after all of that, and then PSG didn't even want him afterward. They should, Paul Reed or anybody, Malcolm Brogdon, anyone worried about their role in the middle of July should call like 15th men on a big time European soccer team and ask them what life is like being an undesirable.
Chelsea's in the United States right now, Brendan. Your team, and think about how many guys are just like, can I get out of here and go somewhere else, like, so I can play? We have too many people. Like Conor Gallagher is just like out here. Like, what am I doing here?
Yep.
You know how many? I can't wait to send you so many preseason Chelsea updates when I see them on Sunday. Very excited about that.
I mean, the owner of your team just got indicted, Chris. So
hey,
I would
hey.
cool
Look,
it on the sending me nonsense about my team.
No, I'm not even nonsense. You have my soccer dad as your coach. I was being genuine, but yes,
Good
Tottenham
stuff.
owner. Yeah.
Okay.
I
thought you were like prefacing your trash talk, and I was like,
No.
I would hold back on the trash talk when your owner is literally going to go to prison. No, he's not going to go to prison. They never go to prison.
But look, when a team owner gets indicted by the Southern District of New York, and he technically lives on a yacht, like, what's going on here?
Chelsea went through that not too long ago, basically. So I mean,
I do love the chant they made for Taboli, for Benis Balashili when he's like, went to France in a Lamborghini. It's great. We need chants in basketball, honestly.
We need more of your singing on the pod going forward.
No, we don't need any singing on the pod for me. That's never something we need. I just hear those and it brings me life that we need like NBA chants about, particularly about the European guys. I feel like it's just like a missed opportunity.
That we definitely do. NBA chants player chants should definitely be a thing.
Like, okay, this is just gonna be Chris's like almost August like NBA fan like hot take corner here. It's not a thing, but it is for right now. I think it's a failure. I actually think NBA crowds are often kind of bad because there's so much pumped in music and it's not actually crowds. It's just like bullshit. These aren't crowds. That's like Jack Harlow playing in the crowd. Like we need actual chants and fan engagement, not like a DJ spinning music. Like, what are we doing here? We don't need gimmicks. We need fans like invested in the clubs. Like, that would actually be cooler. Like, you get more creativity and engagement from fans often at MLS games than you do a lot of NBA crowds. Just saying.
Yes. And I would say even the NFL does it a little better, I would personally say.
Yeah, because there's like a tailgate
they just
culture.
Let it breathe.
Yeah.
Even in stadium, it's like there's just a lot of screaming, and the PA announcer will break in with, the down and distance in a really dramatic way to let you know to get hyped up. But other than that, there's not a lot of pumped in anything. But it's okay. Our sport doesn't have diehard fans. We got to do something about that ourselves. That's what we're here for.
That's right. Let's get some chants going. I think we need to get more creative. If the Brits can do it, we can do it. Okay, anyway, Jaylen Brown. Brendan, Jaylen Brown's getting paid quite a bit of money. This is not a surprise. It finally got done. He came back from a trip in Europe, I believe, and
Spain.
In Spain, and that man is now going to be getting paid a supermax of $304 million. It is currently the richest contract in the league. It won't be for long. We're going to keep seeing more and more and more of these massive supermaxes. For certain cases, Jason Tatum, his teammate in particular, is going to be making so much money. Mm-hmm. Brendan, look, this is what I want to say, kind of speak out of the two sides of my mouth on this a little bit. I think it's kind of you have to on a deal like this. on one hand, they had to do this. This is what you pay your really good players to keep them. This is what you pay guys who, despite some flaws, is a very good player, is impactful. I think by some of the uber nerdy community is underrated in certain ways. I think this is a thing you do. On the other hand, it's going to be hard for any player at Jaylen Brown's level. I think even upper above this. I think it's going to be really hard for any one of these players to always live up to the money on some of these deals. Some of these the money on these deals is crazy, right? Some of the money on these deals is just so high that
it's the same percentage as it's been. Why is it any different for him to live up to a 35% max than it was for somebody 5 years ago who signed a super max to live up to theirs?
It's just because it's
the
more.
Total.
It's just because it's more. It's just because it's more. It's $304 million. That's why. That's why. I think that, like, when you and like, so there's a Ringer piece about this where it's like Wiggins is going to make 54.5 in 2024, 2025, and 25-26.
Do you mean
That's
Jaylen
half.
Brown?
No, I'm saying this is a point of comparison making. Wiggins is going to make.
Well, Andrew Wiggins hasn't signed a contract like that yet, so I don't know what you mean.
No, he has a contract. Does he not have a?
No.
Does he not have a contract to 24, 25, and 25, 26? If not, this piece is incorrect.
Are you saying $56 million combined?
Yeah, I'm saying 54.5
okay.
over those. Yeah, he's making 54.5 over 24, 25, and 25, 26. Brown is going to make $109 million over those 2 years. The numbers for some of these really big deals are just going to be so high that I think you're just going to see. Like, I just think it's going to get harder to live up to some of these deals because the numbers are so high. It's not about the cap percentage to some degree. That's how it's going to be spun. I just think the numbers are so high that it gets harder and harder to kind of like fully maximize some of what they are to some degree. That's just where I think we're at.
Yeah, I guess 5 years ago, if you had two players on 35% supermaxes on the same team, like let's say when James Harden and Russell Westbrook ended up on the Rockets together, you know, they had cheap Clint Capella, cheapish Eric Gordon, you know, some young guys, not a lot of depth. Robert Covington gets traded there, and you're kind of just scrounging around. Like, that became cost prohibitive for them. This will become cost prohibitive for the Celtics. I don't really think it's any worse now. I think the problem that I think is really truly, as much as I agree that you draw the line in the sand here of you either give Jaylen Brown the contract that he's owed and eligible to get based on his own accomplishments, which is the important part here. He got all NBA second team. Like, this is not just some random thing that happens because of how long he's been in the league or this and that. He earned it because he had an amazing season. He was really, really, really good last year. So unless you're going to you're either going to give him that contract or you're going to trade him, is my point. So I get why you do it. But as much as that's true, like, I went back and looked, and I brought this up in the last podcast, but I wanted to remember the details. Blake Griffin. He signed a Supermax at age 28. So 1.5 years older than Jaylen is right now, in July 2017. And, of course, we all remember, got traded 6 months later for Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick. So I understand the value stuff is a little different now than it was then. But is Jaylen going to have more or less trade value when he's 27, upcoming midway through this year, the first year after he signed his extension, than Blake Griffin was then? Like, do you think the Celtics could do better if next summer they underperform or he gets upset or the money gets to be a problem and they have to pivot and trade Jaylen Brown on this contract? Can they get better than two, youngish role players and a first-round pick? That's what the Clippers got for Blake Griffin. Is it going to be better or worse than that?
I think maybe better just because he's not the injury concern. That's the differentiator there to me, because Blake already had real injury concerns when he got that contract.
And you would say the same thing about John Wall, right? I mean, that's what happened with him. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to me as these continue, because like one of the guys I think we both have on our should be traded list that we can get to in a second is already on one of these super maxes. the Suns' pivot chip, if it ever were to come to it, is Devin Booker, who's on a supermax, and trading him to reset things if it ever got that bad. Like, what the value is of these players who are at the very least like reasonably paid, but by the end of the contract probably overpaid. Maybe Bradley Beal is the example. I know he had the no trade clause, but like, what would Bradley Beal have even gotten if he didn't have a no trade clause? How much would the Wizards have gotten back for him?
I mean, maybe at least one first, and then, or a better player than they got, right? Like you would think, just because he wasn't dictating things as much. But it is a lot of money, and Brendan, here's the other part of it that I think is kind of part of this that isn't like a team building thing or like a cap thing. I think that part of the numbers we're going to see now are going to be figures owners are going to be more hesitant to pay at times. I just think we're going to be in that space with some of these. Like, you're going to have some owners that are just not going to want to do some of this or pay some of this. That's okay. Like, I like, if there's certain guys you don't want to pay it for, I don't think that's like an unreasonable thing where you want to absorb some of these, right? And I wonder too if we start seeing a middle ground. I wonder too if like this hasn't how it's been worked lately. The contracts have been, you give the guy with the max, if he's really good, the maximum of what he's owed, and you celebrate the win of it. But let's use Darius Garland as an example here. Let's say when he's just about to kick in his he's just starting his 5-year rookie max, the fun max, right? As Wendy calls it. When he gets to his next deal, heading into his late 20s, into his 30s on that deal, let's say he's really good, but he makes some All-NBA teams. He's Supermax eligible. Like, I could see a world where like you have to thread the line of, hey, this guy's really good. We don't know if he's Supermax good. Can you thread the needle between the normal max and the Supermax and still find happy parties where some of these numbers get a little bit lower, especially when you have to consider the second apron? Like, we are in the second apron world now as well. Like, this is just complicating a lot of this, I think, for some of these teams. I think these deals are here's how I'll put it. I think the Supermax deals that we're going to see given out are complicating an already complicated salary cap environment for teams to navigate.
Yeah, I think the only real difference, even hearing you go through all that, is the second apron. Because a lot of what you're describing has always been the case. I mean, Blake Griffin, to continue with that analogy, like, he got cut. He got bought out on the last year of his Blake Griffin, of his Supermax contract. And Russell Westbrook just had the same thing happen. James Harden luckily was able to keep it going a little longer than those guys. But the history of it's not great. John Wall, obviously, like the biggest cautionary tale of all, mostly because of the fluke injuries and everything. But like the risk of giving people so much of the cap has always been there, and these deals have not gone well, period. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when the worst of all of this was going on, like pre-COVID, that, like, I remember Haley O'Shaughnessy at The Ringer wrote a really long piece about, like, did the NBA, like, disastrously screw this whole Supermax thing up? These players are still getting traded. They're not even staying on their teams, which is supposed to be the point, right? If they're great and loyal, they get rewarded for it, and their team is able to offer them more than other teams are. But then they get traded anyway, and then these guys were getting hurt, and the value is bad and everything else. I think we're a little bit away from that now, but the risk has always been there. I think that the Boston thing that they have to worry about, and the new part of all of this, is the second apron. But I think that teams, to me, honestly, like, I feel like the risk of the second apron is going to be palatable before long. I think that teams are going to just understand that it's just another one of the costs of pursuing a championship. Unless you get lucky and you have a player great enough to win with a weaker supporting cast, or you just are good enough early enough in the players' careers, kind of like the Warriors were, you're just going to have to pay this, and you're going to have to deal with the second apron, and you're going to have to pay the significant luxury tax like you have seen teams always do. Like, I don't actually know if the second apron is going to be something that dramatically changes the top of the league, even if the league wants it to.
Yeah, I will admit I might just have sticker shock on some of these numbers, Brendan. I really just might, because these numbers are huge. Like, they're not killing.
The Suns got sold. Forget the Suns. The Charlotte Hornets just got sold for $3 billion.
I know. I'm just saying.
I mean, what we're talking about is just like a NWO here,
The numbers are just getting crazy. I think it's just I think I am just not used to how big these numbers have gotten.
Well, as you said to start it off, it's the first of many, so get used to it, I guess.
Yeah, and look, I should be used to some of it considering like I'm a soccer fan who just like was reading how much Kylian Mbappe was getting offered by like Saudi Arabia, and it's like the price for these athletes is getting really, really high. And I'm glad for them because like Jaylen Brown making $300 million is great for Jaylen Brown. Like independent of everything else we have said or talked about. Like that's a win for Jaylen Brown. He's even if that's whatever the tax rate is in that guy is still making like more money than I'm going to see in my lifetime, you know?
He already did when he was a rookie, but
like this is like you can like this is like another tier of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know. Of course, I'm for the most part, if they're part of an industry that's generating this much money, then they should see their cut of it. That hasn't changed, but it is huge. We'll see what happens. To transition us to the should be traded but won't be all-stars, do you think of Jaylen Brown as somebody? He's not on either of our teams, as I can see from our outline, but did you think about putting him on here? He was the inspiration for me bringing this idea to the table. I don't have him on my list, but did you think about it?
No, I did not. I kind of think if you have him and Tatum, that's still just such a strong position to build from, and they've made two finals made a finals and almost made another one second in a row. Like I just kind of think like you don't rush that. You try to do other stuff, which they're obviously trying to do with this Marcus Smart trade and everything.
So I'll start us off then, because my first one is a little bit of a version of what trading Jaylen Brown would be, and it's something I actually wish teams would do more of, which is to trade players early in their careers and flip things over in order to keep the longest title window open for their superstar player, which is Tyrese Maxey.
Okay, this is the one, Brendan, that I think I most disagree with. It's the one I'm not on board with this.
Okay,
you make the case first though.
Yeah, what I'll start off by saying is Tyrese Maxey is on his way to becoming a fringe all-star, if not an all-star caliber player. I think everything you would look at would tell you he's right there. You know, probably needs to get better as a finisher, but is a lights-out shooter, does get to the free throw line. He had a nearly 3-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio last year. So those are all positive things. He's like 24 years old, right? He's on the trajectory to be great. But I think for the Sixers specifically, to me, he's best used in a trade that gets you someone even better than that. More ready to win right now with Joel Embiid in his prime, coming off of an MVP season, than trying to let perfect be the enemy of good. With all these ideas around, well, we'll wait on his extension, and then we'll get cap space, and he'll still be the third or fourth best player on our team, but it'll be cost affordable, and all this stuff. Turn Tyrese Maxey into a player who can win a championship with Joel Embiid, which I don't think Tyrese Maxey can do right now.
I agree with your premise. I just kind of think you need him and the other guy, and optimally, I don't know how much better they are if it's like him and Dame. If it's like Embiid and Dame versus and you have the window consideration as well. Like you have to think about the long-term health of your franchise a little bit here. This is a guy that if you could have done this a little bit before this and kept Harden, I would have been like, sure, I could see that a little bit more. But I think your infrastructure, if you're them, is so vulnerable that I wonder. I think getting rid of him in any way right now is a very hard pill to swallow unless you're bringing back like a ton of stuff that really is going to get you to a place where it's like you got a coaster and you have the depth you need to make a run. Because remember, this team isn't maybe just going to lose Harden. Yang's gone. You know, Tobias Harris is the last year of his contract. Like this isn't a team that's exactly like brimming with like talent in their prime right now. Maxey's into his prime, and there's a lot of value in that. There is some volatility in that. You can't have some up and downs in that. You know, we know that progress is not always this straight trip to the moon, right? Like you're going to have some bumps. Certainly there's defensive concerns with Maxey as well. But I would get real scared to trade Tyrese Maxey right now if I'm Philly.
So he had a negative defensive estimated plus minus last year. To your point, he's 6'2". What precedent is there for someone who's 6'2", 200, and not a point guard, most notably? Although I did point out the assisted turnover stuff. He is a good passer, but I just don't quite think he's Chris Paul or anything out there,
sure.
You know, which is obvious. That guy's never been the second best player on a championship team,
sure.
Especially in an era where everybody's big, you know, and the league is getting more versatile positional size is at a premium and all these different things. Like, I hear you that maybe what they could turn Maxey into isn't good enough, but I actually do think the team would be significantly better. If you're saying a world where James Harden is not part of this equation no matter what, and you're saying who should the second best player on this team be, Tyrese Maxey or Damian Lillard? Come on, the team's way better with the second option.
It would be what else I think you could do with like Tobias Harris and all these other things to figure it out. That would really
Keep
really,
them.
really.
I mean, they were in the conference. They were one win away from the conference finals with that exact team with Harden in the place. So you're turning Harden and Maxey into Damian Lillard, and that is a little bit of, of course that when you factor the Harden piece into it, that matters. But you still have Tobias Harris, you still have D'Anthony Melton and PJ Tucker and everybody, Bball Paul, future Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, I guess you do have Pascal Siakam at $7 million a year, then you're fine. Okay, I'm more amenable to the...
I'm not selling you.
You kind of are. It's just like I am a big Maxey guy, and I would be really scared to dump that, and the risk there to me is just high. There's a risk there that I have a hard time calculating and telling you exactly what it is.
Yeah, I don't think they will do it. I can see the case for not doing it. I just think Tyrese Maxey is probably a 3 or a 4 on a championship team, and if you have a chance to turn him,
yeah, he's a 3,
to turn him plus something else into a 1A or a high level 2, then I would do it. And I just think they have an opportunity with a few different possibilities right now to do that, and they've just made it very clear that they're not going to, which is a surprise to me. But who's your first SBTBWB All-Star?
I'm going to go to the Orlando Magic, and I'm going to say Jalen Suggs. I just kind of think they have a lot of guards. They sell Fultz. They have this Karl-Anthony situation. They just drafted a guard. I just want this kind of for Jalen Suggs because I think he would be the guy that gets squeezed out of a payday. He's going to be extension eligible after this upcoming season. And I think that guy is good. I think there's a shooting. Like, obviously, we need to see what the shooting is going to look like and long term what he kind of develops in as a shooter. But I believe in this guy's defense. I believe in his size. I believe that this guy can be a 16-game player. I think this guy can absolutely be in the playoffs and be someone that thrives. There's still work to be done there. 32.7% from 3 is just not good enough as a guard. But he's obviously going to be the guy that gets squeezed. Like, you can see that coming a mile away here. Really good pedigree. Another team, and it's at a tough spot at guard, so there's not always like the obvious fits for some of these guys. And at a point in the league where there's a lot of really good guards and a lot of depth at that spot. Mm-hmm. But I think this is a guy that you get him another situation, you get him a chance that's going to invest in him long term, and I think you could let him grow, and I think it would benefit him, and I think it would kind of clear the way for Orlando to kind of invest minutes into some of the other guys they have, including the guy they just drafted.
Yeah. I just see him as, to me, like the second most deserving of minutes guard on their roster. So, like, I almost would just say he's a guy who should get more minutes but won't, But if they're not going to give him to him, then sure. But, like, why wouldn't they just play him over Karl-Anthony and over Joe Ingles and over, even Anthony Black for now, Like, I think behind Fultz, he should just be right there in the rotation, and they should be prioritizing his value that way. But it doesn't. Yeah.
So then trade trade Anthony, then like trade Cole-Anthony if that's the case, right? Like I think that's the other thing you think about. The other thing I would say, Brendan, is if I really really love Anthony Black, mm-hmm. and I think they took him. I think they do. I want him to get some of the lumps out of the way and play and be ready for when Paolo's year 3, year 4, year 5 comes and you think you're ready to ascend when Franz is ready for that kind of leap, right? Yeah. I think you need to be kind of planning for that now, and I want Anthony Black to play to be ready for that. And Suggs would be an obstacle to that. And I understand you maybe want to be more competitive this year. Suggs would be a part of the equation for you to be more competitive this year. And maybe the answer is just like you trade Cole-Anthony, but like I felt Jalen Suggs was a more sexy thing to talk about in this exercise.
Yeah, right? I think they should have traded Cole-Anthony a while ago. I don't know what Cole-Anthony is.
I like Cole.
You do?
I like it. I think that it's hard to find a fit for him in a good team, but like I sometimes have just a soft spot for like guards that can get buckets like that. Like, it's just he can be like, I mean, Jordan, like it took a while, and they're obviously different players. He's not the same size, but like Jordan Clarkson was kind of that for a long time, and then he kind of found a little niche for himself in Utah. It could just be situation based and things. And maybe having Rudy Gobert was certainly helpful from a defensive perspective there as well. But I just like want Jalen Suggs. I think Jalen Suggs are still really good basketball ahead of him, and him getting to a spot where he could kind of flourish a little more, or just clear out minutes for him in Orlando. To me, I'm just into him getting that opportunity. So that's my Jalen Suggs answer.
So my next one is the flip side of the Jaylen Brown thing that we were talking about. One is the idea of trading somebody early, which I guess Jaylen Brown sort of wouldn't be at this point. Maybe I got that comparison a little wrong. This one is a little closer. LaMelo Ball.
Yeah. I like this pick because they gave him the money, and you better be really sure he's your franchise guy if you're giving him that money.
Oh, see, this is not a belief thing in LaMelo Ball. What else are they spending their money on? I think he can be a very, very great part of a championship team. It's not about them wasting money on him. They have to get to the salary floor and all that stuff. He's their only really expensive player outside of Gordon Hayward. It's much more of, to me, more teams should do the Kristaps Porzingis thing of if the rest of your roster is not ready to win when your star gets to their second contract, and that star has significant trade value and a team desires them and will give you a lot of stuff, then roll that star spot over and get significant assets back. Continue your rebuild if the timeline doesn't work, and prosper. Like that to me feels, I know that it's so hard when you finally get one of those guys to give that player up, and I know the Porzingis thing had a lot of baggage. There was the criminal stuff around him at the time, and the relationship seemed to be bad between him and the franchise, which we don't know is the case with the Ball and Charlotte. They just got new ownership. I'm kind of stripping the context away a little bit to make the point that teams should be okay to say LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller are not going to be great players ready to win a championship at the same time. So let's not force it. Let's get a high first-round pick and another couple of great role players or something back for Ball, and now try our rebuild over again with Brandon Miller. I mean, we see teams do this in the NFL with quarterbacks now fairly often, and it shouldn't be so scary for NBA teams to do the same thing.
I don't think you're wrong. I'm intrigued by this. I think if I was another team that could look at LaMelo and absolutely say, this is a guy that in a better environment, in a better organization, a better run organization, we can get more out of him. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say at all. I mean, I think, Brendan, I think more times than I'm willing to admit about what his career would look like if he ended up in Golden State. You know, like if they had picked him instead of Wiseman.
It's like one of the biggest. I mean, they won another championship anyway, but that is like one of the biggest what ifs that might go down in NBA history is them making that pick the way they did. They would be a lot less worried right now. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
right?
and like they could have maybe turned Jordan. Maybe Jordan Poole doesn't get paid. Maybe they trade Jordan Poole for not Chris Paul, right? Yeah. And they're loaded up again, and it's a whole other conversation. To me, that's one of the big what ifs we have. That is that of the draft in recent years. That is the big what if to me. And look, other teams would have a good right about this. I don't know what the right fit for LaMelo
Brooklyn
would be interesting. So my thought was Brooklyn or Minnesota.
Yeah. Brooklyn to me is the one that came to mind. It's like what we for 1 millisecond convinced ourselves Ben Simmons might be able to do when he went there in the Harden trade, but LaMelo could actually do it. Like, you just put him out there with their shooters and Claxton as a role guy, whew. For a team that's allegedly kind of in the Damian Lillard sweepstakes, but not really, if somebody like LaMelo ever became available, that's really the thing. Because he could play off their wings a lot even better than I think Lillard could.
Him and Ant together would just be filth to me, and then have who says he's on both of our lists, so I guess he's on both our lists. No, he's on both our lists. Who says no for Karl-Anthony Towns for LaMelo Ball straight up? Or whatever's matching salary that the Hornets
Minnesota has to give more because Towns has already been paid. So he is on a supermax.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
that's the thing, and yeah, let's get into Towns because
here's the Towns thing. I think if they'd had I was listening to John Krasinski on the Low Post the other day, and it kind of made me think if they'd had a trade they liked, he'd be like somewhere else right now.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I was going to lay out before we started this whole thing, and one of my guys is a little bit on the fringe of this. There's a difference between won't be traded and can't be traded. You know, like there's a difference between the team just being stubborn, which is sort of what our lists are trying to get at, versus like if there was a good offer, they would already be gone type of thing. Like there's a lot of like one of your guys, I think you have labeled that way, and one of your guys I actually think should be, which we can get to. But Towns might be in that camp too. Maybe I didn't hear that. I didn't hear him talking about it that way. But I mean, it's just about money, really, to me. As is well documented, I'm a Minnesota Timberwolves truther, and I think so. They were plus 0.4 Towns and Gobert last season, despite no chemistry, no continuity. Cat was injured. That tandem to me, like they're never going to be perfect, but I think in the regular season they can win with it, and I think maybe there's an upside in the postseason for it to pan out decently. Are they going to win a championship that way? I don't know. I mean, it's way too early. They haven't even, made it to the conference finals or anything yet. But like, this is just going to be untenable by the time that Ant and Jaden McDaniels are on their second contracts with Gobert making what he's making. So it's just sort of like a ticking time bomb money-wise, and why not get out in front of it? Which maybe it sounds like they tried to.
Yeah, I agree. I am not the biggest. I think Towns is like a change of scenery, goes somewhere he could be like the number 2 perfect candidate to rehabilitate him. I think clearly very talented, clearly very skilled. Not the best shooting big man of all time, but like a very good shooting big man. And I think you put him in another space, another organization that can bring something better out of him. I think he'd be better for it. I think it could bring him to new heights.
You think so? I don't really think that's a possibility. I think he is what he is, and it might just be like a team that's a little more desperate for it, or that doesn't have Rudy Gobert on his team. But like, I don't think Towns is going to like turn into another guy, personally.
I tend to agree with you more than not, right? But I think that's the case you're making if you're another team. If you're Charlotte, if you're Sacramento doesn't need to know, but like a different version of Sacramento. If Portland in a different life. If like Detroit got real weird, and we're going to talk themselves into something like this, that's how you do it. You would say, this guy can really shoot it. He needs to be in a better organization. He needs to have a coach that's going to kind of maybe hold him accountable on defense.
Yeah.
And he needs a lead ball handler that has already kind of superseded him, a veteran that can really push him in a certain way, right? I think that's what this is about. I think that's the argument you would make if you're going to look at Cat and say, I can rehabilitate the guy and make him live up to the value of his contract and win with him. That's the argument you would tell yourself. That you can fix him. Now, does that often work? No. But would you tell yourself that maybe it could? Yes.
Yeah, as much as I think the Gobert trade from a player fit standpoint is not as bad as it's been made out to be, even though the value of that trade was atrocious, I do also like love the idea of what it could have looked like to keep Vanderbilt, have a real great backup in Kessler, and just let a lineup of, Ant, Vanderbilt, Jaden McDaniels, and some sort of point guard with Kessler backing Towns up as a little bit of support system behind him. Like, I would have just loved to see them build on that first round appearance and close series against Memphis without hitting the panic button. My last question on Towns, though, do you think there's any truth to the idea that the uncertainty around Embiid is limiting what interest Minnesota can get on a Towns trade? Because I thought about that today when I was thinking about, like, why has he not gotten dealt, or who might be interested? Like, if teams kind of know, hey, in the not too distant future, Embiid might be available, like, why would you trade for the next 5 years guaranteed that Towns already has?
Yeah, and I think right now a lot of teams would be telling themselves they could be in the Embiid race even if that isn't realistic.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's reasonable. Like, I'd rather wait out for 5% chance at an MVP than go all in for Towns right now. I don't think that's crazy to do.
Yeah, or I would wait, like, honestly, like, in let's say in a year, like, the Donovan Mitchell's like, yeah, I'm not signing the extension, but the Knicks do something else. Mm-hmm. I would rather, like, trade stuff for Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, sure. Even that is
like, or pick
different position,
but
that's
pick other
too, yeah.
Like, right, but I'm saying there's other, like, star guys that I think might come available that you could just be like, yeah, I'd rather get that guy than Karl.
Mm-hmm. I think it's fair. Do you want to go to another center on your list that you told me I don't have to talk about, but we can?
Look, this is just Brendan. This is just like you're. I'm just not a Deandre Ayton guy at this point. I'm just real skeptical of where this is going with him. Mm-hmm. If I could find a trade for him to get this trade just might not exist.
Well, I
think that's maybe what the market. That's the thing. That's part of why should be traded but won't all-star, because like there might just not be a reasonable trade for him that makes sense for either team. Mm-hmm. But the Suns case in particular, I would just be trying to use his salary for like a cheap center and like another wing at all costs if I possibly could.
Well, so the offer that was out there from Dallas, according to Mark Stein, was Tim Hardaway Jr., Richaun Holmes, and JaVale McGee.
I'm out on that. I don't want that.
So
it doesn't do it for me. Like Hardaway Jr. is like a bad defender, and like you got other wings.
He just
like
cooked.
Eric Gordon's
is really
better.
What it is. I mean,
Eric Gordon's better. Eric Gordon's better than him, and you got him for nothing.
Well, they didn't have Eric Gordon when that trade offer was
okay,
on the
table. But you got Eric Gordon who's better. Like I would trust that process over not. And then like it's JaVale who like didn't play last year and is capped at like 20 minutes, and Richaun Holmes who didn't play last year.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I think the Suns agree with you. I think they would have loved to trade him. They were actually early to it before I think anybody. They allegedly explored trades for him after the finals in 2021. Then they almost traded him for Domantas Sabonis in 2022. Then they didn't want to extend him last year or give him a new contract, and almost, were searching high and low for sign-in trades until their hand was forced by the Pacers. So I think that they absolutely would love to trade him. I just think his value is precarious, to say it nicely. But on this team this year, he's pretty irreplaceable, all things considered. If the next best they could do is freaking Richaun Holmes, he's their best bet to do things that are necessary for a team to win a title. It's easier said than done to find that replacement level center, I think. Yeah, I don't know. The problem is that a lot of teams did better with their second contract for their centers, so the market has been set and he's above it. Like Wendell Carter, Robert Williams, Clint Capella, these guys that have gotten second and third contracts below $20 million. It's like even Isaiah Hartenstein, Mitchell Robinson. There's so many examples of guys that make so much less than him that it's like, why would you trade for him unless you're just desperate like the Mavs?
Yeah, you really kind of maybe needed to try to get a sign and trade out of the Pacers last year before this happened, got Miles Turner out of it, and you'd probably be in a better position. You would,
but Miles Turner belongs on the list that I just listed off, right? He's already paid, and he makes less than that. So I think like Miles Turner's just better value straight up. I wouldn't have done that if I was Indiana.
Yeah, I agree. You gotta dream,
I think the Hawks one was the one that always jumped out to me last summer. If you could have gotten Capella and like the pick that became AJ Griffin, like that would have been really nice. Again, dreaming. All right, my last one, or next one, Klay Thompson. I think I should have done this sooner than 70 minutes into the podcast because it's another.
Nah, look, we can make this a YouTube pull out, but because that's how this will work, and people will consume this as a short. But
so this is the one
spicy,
though,
brother.
Chris, that Klay Thompson to me belongs on the should be traded but won't be all-stars, but I think he's closer to can't be traded. Expiring $43 million contract, and I just don't know if he's valuable enough to make sense in a deal for anybody based on last postseason. So, like, if I'm Golden State, I look long and hard at using him as the matching salary for a bigger trade. That's probably the main utility that he has at this point in time, is going and getting somebody great without having to give up Steph or Draymond or Wiggins, who make a lot of money for you, and Chris Paul, who probably isn't even good enough to make it to that. So, again, we talked about Karl-Anthony Towns. Could that type of trade work? The Pelicans for Brandon Ingram. I'm not quite sure if the value maps out. Toronto for Siakam. You add the young guys, Kuminga, Moody, some of the picks, which the Warriors actually have a decent amount of. Use the $43 million that Klay's making. Upgrade that spot. Go all in. Use his salary before it's off your books. That's like the ideal, but it's Klay Thompson. He won 4 rings for you. He went through injuries. I don't know if it's realistic.
I am. Boy, this is just like, it's just like he would be one of those guys. Hall of Fame doesn't look right in this other jersey. Guy, right? Like that's what this would be.
Do you think that they pay him next summer? Because that's a big question that you would have to factor in. Or,
I don't think,
what do they pay him?
I don't think they can pay him for a contract that's at what he's at now, or a raise.
More or less than what they just gave Draymond.
What did you know off the top of your head what Draymond's AAV is?
25, between 25 and 30 million a year.
I could see it. I could see 23 to 25 in that range. And you just say like, hey, you've done a lot for us. Like, we treat our guys well, and we're gonna go out on our shield with you, Steph and Dre.
I mean, they already gave him the thank you contract. They paid him when he was hurt. You know, like, I don't know if it's, I don't know the details of their, like, obviously, whatever would go on between the two parties, but I have to imagine that Klay would be understanding of, like, you're going to get rewarded for being a starting caliber wing on a good team. But you're not getting some sort of Godfather money just because you have done things for us. We already did that for you. Now you're getting properly compensated. You know what I mean? And I don't know, but that version of events is not terrible. He was better than, like, I think he wasn't as good as, like, what we think of Klay Thompson as being. He wasn't even as good as he was in 2022.
He's not.
But he was fine. He took 10 threes a game and made close to 40% of them last year during the regular season. And he played like 70 games. So, like, this is not some sort of broken carcass of a player.
No, there is like an overall field goal percentage drop on twos that is not nothing. And I think that if he's not the same defensive player anymore.
He wasn't for one playoff run, but would you have said that after they won the championship? I mean, he's not the same as he was like pre-multiple catastrophic injuries, but I just mean he was passable when they won the title. Just last year he dropped off. So why can't he bounce back to 2022?
No, that's fair. I think that's possible. I think I don't know how culturally or PR-wise you could trade him more than anything else. I think I could get the basket. You could talk me into this basketball-wise, and some other team you could just be like, hey, you got Klay Thompson. You get to so you got Klay Thompson. Yeah. Like, we've seen those kinds of shit happens before. It's like the PR and like locker room part of this. Like, could you imagine the Draymond Green podcast episode after a Klay Thompson trade?
Klay would be on it.
Yeah, Klay's absolutely on it, and they're just like trashing Mike Dunleavy for like an hour. You know what I mean?
Isn't
like,
it so bizarre that Mike Dunleavy is just the GM of that team now? It's wild. Yeah,
look, we're in a world, Brendan, where like guys that we grew up kind of watching in a lot of ways, or like in his case for me, like I covered him for like a blip. He's in one of like the most insane like pregame video. Like I'll send it to you, but he's in one of the most insane pregame like hype videos or like team hype videos that like it feels like it had to be made in like the late 90s. And I couldn't believe that like this came out in like 2016, something like that, 2014. Like, it's nuts, but like, yeah, I don't know how, like, yes, this isn't a guy that has had the same like relationship in the same way that like Bob Myers did, but like, can you, like, how do you even like sell it to the locker? How do you go to Steph and be like, hey man, we traded Klay, we got like some seconds?
That's why I said it. No, you don't get some seconds. What you do, and the only reason I bring it up, is to use his salary before it's off your books to go get a superstar. I'm not saying to dump him. That would be stupid. It would be stupid from a basketball standpoint too, because you need him. They don't have a deep team. Like, even whatever he is now is better than nothing. So I'm not saying just get rid of the guy. I'm saying if you went to the Raptors,
should they prioritize? They're going to do this.
I listed 3, but if you went to the Raptors and you said, we'll send you Klay, Moody, and 2 future top 5 protected first round picks for Pascal Siakam. Like, you're in the room. You're on the short list that they're calling back as negotiations take place, I would say.
I think the level of star is the tricky part to gauge here, because I think to do this you got to go like aim really high, and I wonder what the best package you could get with what they could offer is. Like, would Toronto do that for Siakam?
Well, I said that they would be in the room at least.
Would Portland's not doing that? You don't need a guard.
The three that I said were Towns, Ingram, and Siakam.
I'm just trying to think of like beyond Ingram. Like, okay, like what they do for Zion?
The Pelicans would absolutely never do that. No. It's not even close to what they would need for Zion. They wanted Scoot Henderson for Zion and couldn't even go for it. They're not going to take Moses Moody. Yeah, it's tough.
I'm like
it's not easy. But I just think it's something that's not getting talked about enough, and I think this season it will be a storyline. What is the future of Klay Thompson with the Warriors? What are the contract outlines of what they might offer him starting to take shape as, and how does that affect the culture? This past year it was Draymond, but he played awesome, so it didn't really become a problem. If Klay is not, continues to deteriorate or gets benched or whatever it might be, then it gets a little uglier. And I think right now would be a perfect time to cash in before any of that happens and do it. But it won't happen, which is the spirit of this list.
I'm trying to think if there's a Kings trade I would do, because Vivek used to be the part owner.
Sabonis is ironically like an awesome fun fit with the Warriors, but him and Draymond would murder one another, so probably not.
Yeah,
probably
it would.
Not
I'm saying would you do? Could you get like 2 picks, Herter and Monk, and just like
it would just be hilarious to
brother.
think of. I'm already on the Sabonis thing. That might be a fine trade, the one that you said, but the idea of Draymond, they're like, you get your money. But you have to play with Chris Paul and Domantas Sabonis, two of the people that you've feuded with the most over the past 5 or so years of your career. And that is your having your cake and eating it too, but also getting it taken away. I don't know what the metaphor would be, but that is your punishment for giving us so much crap over the years. You have to play with those guys.
You're putting Draymond Green in like a steel cage WWE match if you do that is what you're doing.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, I have one more, and I'll just empty mine out, and then you can go. DeMar DeRozan. I don't have a ton to say because this is the one that was, to me, a little bit more on the can't-be-traded list because I just don't fully know who would want him. I have a few ideas. He's expiring $29 million, so you're leaving yourself open to him just walking next summer. I don't think he has a ton of value, but I think he has enough value that I would try to cash in on that now. We've talked about Chicago a lot. I don't think LaVine is tradable with the injury history and the years left and the money. They just brought back Vucevic, so they've already decided on that particular star. So if they want to look toward the future, I think they should just deal DeRozan and start to reset things. I had New York for Julius Randle and some assets. I had a backup plan for Miami if they, for some reason, did not get Damian Lillard. And I had Detroit, who's a little bit trying to win now, and I think DeMar and Kate are actually compatible. You could get like a first-round pick from them with like the Marvin Bagley and Alec Burks salaries with Detroit. Like you're not getting something great, but if I could even get a good first-round pick or a good young player back for DeRozan from somebody, I would seriously explore doing that now and start to slowly reset my team around whatever the next version is going to be. That won't include DeMar DeRozan.
I have Zach LaVine on my list for similar reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of risk in trading for him. He's also going to be someone that's going to want a ton of money coming up, and like what that looks like on his injury stuff is really tricky. Like I tried to find fake trades for him, and it was really hard. And Brandon, broadly with the Bulls, I think with DeRozan, with LaVine, if I'm them, I'm trying to pivot off of them and just say, we got to do something different here and just start from the studs. And that brings back Ayo Dosunmu. Pat Williams still 21. Maybe Vooch is just like the vet you have around to eat minutes and make shots for you and be a guy you can put in marketing material or whatever.
But I think Vooch is selling tickets. I love that idea. Somebody in Chicago looks up and they just see like a banner of Nikola Vucevic along some street in downtown Chicago, and they're like, "Dad, can we go?" Like, yeah,
some kid. You know what I love? I love a mid-30s big guy just popping for threes. Yeah, that's for me as a child,
I have an idea for LaVine.
TikTok. Okay.
The Pacers.
Sure. Yeah.
Buddy Hield, Daniel Tice.
Okay.
And like one of their young guys gets you there basically.
Rick. Also for us getting to watch that, Rick Carlisle coaching Zach LaVine is awesome content.
I never know what to make of the Carlisle stuff. Like, does he love coaching Buddy Hield any more than he would love coaching Zach LaVine? I mean,
I'm just no. I don't know one way or the other. I'm just saying it would be interesting. That's it.
yeah. Well, I just think like if you're just talking about upgrading the Buddy Hield spot at a pretty minimal cost, Zach LaVine's just like a great version of Buddy Hield. I mean, he just like the best thing about Zach LaVine is his shooting, and then from there it's like the athleticism, the dribbling ability, all that stuff. But hey, equally good shooter with some other stuff, and all you got to do is give up, Daniel Tice and one of your young players. Like, okay, I could be talked into it. Very offensively inclined backcourt, though. That'd be the problem there. Halliburton and LaVine.
Yeah. A lot of pressure on Turner to really throw. I just think the Bulls are in a rut, and this is the way out of the rut.
Yeah, I don't think Zach LaVine's
I don't either. Brendan, there's one guy on my list I want to save because I want us to unpack what this team does once they trade this certain forward we've mentioned a couple of times. So I'm going to table him, and I want to end on Paul George.
Yeah, I don't think
he is
pretty hard about putting him on.
I think the Clippers, they have this stadium thing arena thing we've heard a ton hanging over them that they're not going to be bad when they go to this new arena.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you could trade Kawhi.
No.
Because I don't think any team can be like we're ready, we're equipped to deal with this. Even a team like maybe like the Bucks could be like sure because like we have Giannis and we could try, or like some team really desperate could be like yeah we can try. But any teams that would give you real stuff are not going to be inclined to trade for Kawhi Leonard considering the injury stuff and considering I don't think teams know what they're getting personality wise, right? I think that's a real thing there. I think with Paul George, still a guy that I think he's either 2 or 3 on a really good team. Market, regardless, I think could really contribute to winning. You can manage his minutes a little bit differently. And I think they just are in a spot where I think the Clippers should be trying to recoup some stuff and really retool here a little bit. They're in a spot where I think like they have the arena coming. I think to some degree they're obviously the second team in LA and Ballmer's really rich, so like money's not always an object for them. But I kind of think sometimes they need to act like a small market team that's in a big market with lots of money. And like this is one of those moments where I might do that. I might be like, Paul George, thank you for your service. I don't know what this means for Kawhi. I don't know if I care that much. Maybe he gets like whatever. We'll figure it out. But I would trade Paul George for some stuff to a team that could really use him. And I think you get some decent value back right now if you did it too.
So if they're keeping Kawhi and not doing like a full sale teardown, then why do they need to trade Paul George?
I just think I just would want to get a little bit out ahead of what's coming here. Is my whole thought process.
Player option
I just
next
think they're
year
staring at the extension stuff and like there's just a barrel of like really bleak stuff coming if they don't pivot in some way. Like they're just unless they just like hire a bunch of one-year mercenaries on big deals or something, or absorb contracts of guys that are maybe overpaid that other teams don't want, and that's how they get to like respectability. They're staring down the barrel of something really complicated, and Paul George is the trade ticket to at least get some stuff back that you can move forward with.
Yeah, I think that they're just so right now too far all in to unwind it, and they might not have the luxury of getting out of that, right? Like because next summer he could decline his player option to become a free agent. It could be over that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Less than a year from now, 11 months from now, it could all be gone. So I totally get the ticking time. We'll know more as the extension talks continue. They're both eligible now, so maybe this gets figured out and develops in a way that's helpful to them. But I just look at, even though some of these guys are expiring, Norman Powell, Marcus Morris, Nicholas Batum, Robert Covington, Ivica Zubac, like those are not players you have on your roster when you want to tear it down. And like I know those things can develop quickly, but I would want to like I that's why I've liked the idea of like, can you turn a couple of those guys into Brogdon? Can you turn a couple of those guys into Harden? Because even if you don't keep Harden, Kawhi, and George together for the next 5 years or something, which of course their age would tell you they can't do, you're at least sort of consolidating and releasing yourself from like the all in, 15 guys making $10+ million weird roster cap situation that they put themselves in. So it's almost like they're too deep in this, but to your point, the timing would suggest like they might just be screwed. I mean, there might not be a solution there.
Yeah, look, I think you're probably right that the unwinding part of this is just really tricky. I just tend to think that I would be trying to unwind this if I can and really think about a pivot. I don't know if this is the team that is going to if you did 5-year outlook of the bleakest outlooks of things just going wrong, the Clippers to me would have to be high up there in terms of things just looking really bad in 5 years. And this is part of why. It's like you're staring down the barrel of something really tricky to navigate, I think, especially if you're again a team that wants to not put in something tough here.
It's not great. It's definitely not great. I guess I just look forward to the cap flexibility that they're going to have and the fact that they're willing to spend, and it's not going to get terrible. A lot of it would just depend on how much you can get back for Paul George, I think, right? I mean,
yeah, and I think that's the other part of it. It's I think if another team is calling you, they're going to say this is a rental. Mm-hmm. He's going to opt out. Why should we give you real stuff for him? And that maybe means he's not tradable. Maybe just saying you gave all this for him and Kawhi, and we need to give them one more run and trust it and hope it works out this time. Fingers crossed. Maybe that's enough too. I mean, that's not a fun pill to swallow if you're the Clippers, but I could get why you would do it.
Yeah, they have their they have a swap with Oklahoma City so they owe their pick this year. They have the swap in 25, then they owe their pick in 2026, and then they're out from the PG trade. So the end is in sight. But yeah, they made their bed with guys who proved to be unreliable. Not great. Yeah. They could also win the championship.
It's in there.
You know?
I don't think so, but maybe. All right, I'm Chris Manning. That's Brendon Kleen. This has been the Just Basketball Show for Tuesday, July 27th. Back at you next week. Talk some WNBA. We have a returning guest lined up to talk about WNBA. I think that episode's going to come out on Tuesday. And we're getting closer and closer to the NBA season. We're going to have some Commissioners Cup WNBA coverage when that comes up in a couple weeks. A lot of big stuff planned here. Please go support our friends at Homage. Click the link. Some money comes back to support the show. Thanks again to Jake Stevens and Dillon Heiser for their work on production. Back at you next week. Enjoy the hoops and the Women's World Cup, too. It's pretty great.